Good afternoon, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Anna Selbach, and I am joined by Etienne Venter, a Gluu partner, and from a consulting company called Process to Product. I'll allow Etienne to introduce himself in just a second. This is sort of a follow-up webinar, as we also had Etienne joining us in October, I think it was last year. We got a lot of good feedback and questions. That event was specifically about ERP. So today, Etienne will talk more about the broader benefits of using Gluu, but working with processes in general. I'll allow him to introduce himself, of course, in just a second, and his topics. Also, there were questions why he ended up using Gluu, so of course he will address that as well. And regarding questions, I encourage you to ask questions today in the Q&A on your right-hand side of your screen. Also, if you are joining on LinkedIn, I'll try to keep an eye on the comments there and address in case you comment on that. But with that, Etienne, I'll allow you to kick off.
Yeah, I'm not too sure how much to say about myself, but as you can see from the image on the older side of things, so I've been in this game for a long time, and I've been in the corporate world for all my years, and a little bit longer than 2 years ago, I started this little company called Process to Product, and what I wanted to do, since I was a practicing enterprise architect and manager of business analysis competencies at various big corporates, involved in processes all the time, I wanted to find a solution that would talk easier to end users, something that will grow adoption. And I then started this company, Process to Product, and I then went on to a whole journey, which I'll cover a little bit later in the presentation, until I found Gluu, and that's where I am right now. But I think I'm going to give away too much now. We'll cover that a little bit later as we go on with the story. That's it.
Right. So I guess I will just let you take you through your slides, and I will ask questions myself and comment so that we try to have this as a dialogue to some extent at least. But I guess you'll lead the way on this.
Okay. So I will jump to this topic, which I've coined business backbone management. And I started this thing because, in my experience, in many cases, when you reach out to leaders and managers in different companies who actually do the business of running a bank or running a retailer or running a healthcare company or whatever, they're not so much aware of the topic business process management, and it sounds a bit foreign to them. And then I started thinking about rephrasing it and started thinking about, what is the backbone of a company? And I guess that's differs from whose perspective you're looking at. So if you talk to corporate leaders and entrepreneurs, they will probably tell you it's people and culture. When you talk to operation managers, they will tell you it's processes and systems. Investors will look at the financial side of things, and your customers and marketers, they will look at customer relationships and brand loyalty and things like that. But at the end of the day, processes are the true backbone because they connect everything. So, they connect your people, your systems, your resources together so that you can efficiently realize your products and services. So it's funny that people don't think about it this way, but yes, without process, you might have very good people, very good systems, and so forth, but they're not utilized effectively. So process brings it all together to utilize your people and resources optimally. It integrates your systems effectively. It ensures consistency and quality, and it drives scalability and innovation. All right, so that is the topic of backbone management. And here's this little picture. It's really based on a framework out there called APQC. And on the APQC side of things, you can see the core capabilities and the support capabilities, and it all boils down to people, processes, and systems, which forms the backbone of your company. So with that,
So just one question
yeah,
before you continue, Etienne. The concept or say the concept or the name business backbone management, is that something that you have came up with, or is it something that other people talk broader about and more new topic, because it's not a well-known theme?
no, it's not well known, and it's actually interesting. And I'm going to pronounce the name incorrectly now. Maybe she's listening to us or not. I don't know. She's in the Netherlands, Hanneke Loefs, and we started debating this thing on LinkedIn about exactly the same problem. Or how can we rephrase this whole business process management topic so it's more understandable? And with that, we started playing around with a lot of ideas, and then I came up with this backbone management concept, and that's something that we tested it with a few people. They liked it, and so it's not a new thing. It's not an old thing. It's a pretty new thing. And I'm not saying it should replace business process management. It depends who you talk to in a company. If they don't understand the concept of business process management, then you should explain it differently so that they realize that it's actually the backbone of your company. So it's another way of achieving the same results, but using a different angle on it. So it's not an industry term as such, no.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Can I go on? You want me?
Yes,
You want
yes,
a question?
please go on. No, not
Okay.
for now. I'll allow you to go on.
Yeah. Okay. So this whole business process management, backbone management, it exists because when you create a vacuum, you need to fill it with something. So the vacuum is caused by challenges. You can all read. These are some of the challenges that companies face, and it will differ from company to company. But in reality, I would like to summarize this into something which is really easy to do. And you can test it yourself in the different departments and businesses where you operate or work. You can walk up to somebody on the floor, and if they are sitting in front of a computer, for instance, you can go to them, tap them on the shoulder, and say, "Tell me, what is your role?" And they will tell you, "Oh, I'm a sales representative, or I'm a claims processor, or I'm this, or I'm that." So then they will be able to answer that. Then you can go a step deeper and say, "Can you show me what you do?" And that's when the fun starts. Then they will call up many things, many documents, if there is anything, and they will have different perspectives of what they're supposed to be doing, and that you can do across a whole team. So let's say you've got a team of claim assessors in an insurance company. Um, you know, the people don't really have insight into the standard ways of doing business. They all are very competent. They all work hard. They all have been trained, but it's not like they can show you. And if changes come through, they really can't show it to you. So, that leads to process inefficiencies, lack of process ownership, because the team leaders and people who own these people, they are all very busy, but they're not really managing the process. They're managing on an ad hoc chaos basis. And we actually, in the insurance company where I worked before, we actually had a thing where uh, we joked about it in a sense that because people don't know what they're doing is because it's a very modern building and it had many floors, and on each floor you've got these meeting rooms. You could never find a meeting room You have to book a meeting room far in advance. And we said it's because people are discovering how they work on the whole every day. So that's why you couldn't find meeting rooms. And it was a joke, but it was actually the reality. When a new project starts, everybody scatters around. There's not a process thinking approach in tackling the project. So that leads to this point number 8, change management resistance, which leads then to high operational costs and so forth. So those are some of the areas I think, all companies have this in a degree. And I think the ones that don't have this are either the ones that really have got business process management under their belt, or they're lying, I
Yeah,
think, to be honest, or they're very small. So they're in a small business. You can probably do this without, formal business process management or backbone management concepts. But as soon as you grow, and I've been working now with consulting now with a fairly small company, um, lots of regulations. It's in the healthcare area, and quite soon they realize that there's such a lot of things that it is actually worth putting some structure to it. And yeah, they're in the process now of evaluating Glue. So I think I don't want to labor the point too far, too much, but you can see
yeah,
that these challenges definitely exist all over. And
yeah.
another thing I
Just
just wanted to say, Anders, is that I'm not negative about AI. I think AI is fantastic, but there is a perception that AI is going to resolve everything. It's going to help for a lot of things, and I think it's going to help at the right places. But to think that it's going to resolve um, these typical things and take away business process management or backbone management is a fallacy.
yeah,
I mean, I've just done a project now where, from a perspective of the company, its supply chain processes, around about 40% of activities are manual. So there's no AI involved in there and so forth. So yeah, that's I
yeah.
think what I wanted to say about
Okay.
these challenges.
Just
We'll go to the
one
next
comment.
slide.
Just maybe one comment or question, because before you proceed. Do you see all of these different challenges as being interconnected? Of course, the process inefficiency and the lack of process ownership are interconnected. But what about the rest of them? Are they also interconnected, or can a company have challenges specific on one or two of these, or is it more a total sum of problems that all appear more or less with the lack of what we call process maturity, if we call it that?
I think I think they all exist. It's not that they are all visible for everybody, but for instance, in the ERP scenario, number 10 at the bottom there, fragmented technology landscape. You find this quite often in companies that the IT department um, is really not so connected to the business landscape. So they have clever tools. They've got data warehouses, and they get a lot of information. And there's a lot of good things that they do. I come from that background, so I'm talking from a real point of expert in this area. But they're not connected to how the operation actually works. So it's all very high level stuff. Let's say everybody went on the agile thing, so you define epics, but what sits below those epics is happening in workshops, which leads to long cycles and so forth. So yeah, I'm not sure if I'm answering you correctly. It's actually all of
Yeah,
these things,
yeah,
and I think it's difficult to point out which one is the top one, but they all lead to something like all of this leads to process inefficiencies, scaling operations, and. So yeah, it's a mix.
yeah. Yeah, and I fully agree. And also what you talked about the technology landscape, really that a lot of even companies that map their technology architecture or IT architecture or digital architecture very detailed and very thoroughly, they very often miss some of the manual processes and how work is actually being done. They don't really realize that. And then, for instance, as the ERP case you talked about last time, then there's a risk that it will be a new big IT digital project will be disconnected from the actual business.
Yeah, I mean, if you take that angle, it depends on the methodology that you use. But I'm making an assumption here that I think most companies follow some sort of an agile or iterative approach. But you will find that they use fancy tools. They would use Jira, they would use DevOps Azure, and so forth. All these tools to manage the epics and the stories and all of that. But there are so few of them that got those epics and stories connected to the activities and processes. So it's not in context to a process, it's in context of people's perception of things. So you can't really trace it back to the process, which means when you do end user testing, you're also actually in a vacuum. But if you had a process and you defined, I'm running ahead now because I'm going to cover this a little bit later. But if you identify your gaps from the processes, and from there you groom your backlog based on those gaps against the processes, you then implement the new solution. You're actually implementing a new process. People don't think of it that way, but that is actually really what it is. And I think what this slide is just trying to say is it's very conceptual. It's not, don't quote me on the numbers here, but the concept is very straightforward. When you have an ad hoc environment versus an optimized environment, if you look at the two from that perspective, your impact on the financial impact in the first scenario, it's a much higher cost, because it takes so much longer to actually deliver. And it's also the quality, because now once you go in delivering, it goes into cycles of redo until it actually works. Where on the optimized area, you have got clear visibility into how the business is working and wants to work. And from that perspective, it's much easier than to bring in new changes. We all know it's difficult enough to bring in changes, but with that perspective, it's so much easier. I'll give you a practical example. I was asked a few years ago to scope a project for a company. They have asked one of the big five, consulting firms to scope it for them, and the guys came back with a horrendous number and many weeks to scope the. It's a big project. It was actually a program. It's also in the supply chain space. So I was very naive. I didn't know what the numbers was, and I didn't know how long they actually quoted. So I looked at the problem, analyzed the problem. I said, "Give me some time. I'll come back with a proposal." And then I came back with a proposal because I followed the process approach. I said, I've calculated we can do this in 5 days. And then they called me in and they said, "No, this is impossible. You can't do this in 5 days." How do you? Then I went through the whole thing and I actually showed them how it is actually possible. And I've done this twice in my career at two different large retailers completely. One is implementing Oracle and the other one was a bespoke application. So yes, I know it works. So because you're bringing context, business context to the problem, and from that point of view, so it actually does work. And I just want to move to this slide up because I'm actually talking a lot about this concept here. Um, if you think about the different phases of your projects, from concept discovery, so that's the big one in the beginning. So few people um, scope the projects based on the impacted business processes of the company, which is sad because ultimately the project touches facets of processes. Now, if you start doing that, you are now incrementally developing new processes and you're deploying them and you bring the whole team on board with the complete change management aspect of that process which you're bringing on board. So it's actually not rocket science. It's actually quite logical. That if you think about your company, the backbone, as we talked about it in the beginning, It is actually the set of processes that you have connected to your people, connected to your systems, your regulations, policies, business rules, all those sort of things. Um, and having a trusted view of that on a continuous basis definitely will make you more agile and give drives agility to deliver quicker. All right.
Just one comment question before the next part here. On the previous slide, you had these different maturity stages. And of course, if you companies that were less mature, the costs or the productivity loss and so on was the financial impact was significantly higher than for the ad hoc compared to the optimized. Can you say maybe a little bit about how what actually defines the different stages? You don't have to go into detail at this stage. It's this and this, and also how should companies really how should they proceed in terms of becoming more mature, of getting away from this ad hoc approach and then into the eventually into the optimized stage? Can you just a few words?
Yeah.
I know it's a big question, but a very broad. But
Yeah, I think let me go back to that graph. So from an ad hoc perspective, I think um, I don't know how all companies operate, but my
yeah,
experience has been that this is actually the case for most companies that I have been involved in, is that processes are ad hoc. You have pockets where it's different, but as a global company, it's ad hoc. It's all over. Then you get to areas where you'll get your processes that it's been a documentation exercise and they have defined it and it sits somewhere in a SharePoint file or wherever, and some tool, whatever, it's defined. But then you get to the stage where it is, managed, or where people are adhering to the processes. I think that's where the big gap becomes in, because that's where the process owner role starts kicking in with the business manager. Those two are aligned with one another. They're not the same person. So your business managers and your process owners have to drive this thing where you're actually managing according to the standard ways of working. And I find that because of the previous two, if they're not there, how can you do it? You can't really manage if those things are not in place. And only once you're actually driving that and managing towards a managed environment or an adherence environment, can you really start optimizing? Because how can you optimize if you're not using it? I mean, you're optimizing in the cloud, not in the cloud, up in the air. But so from that perspective, I think it is why this topic of backbone management or business process management is still so valid, is because so few companies actually do these things properly. And yeah, unfortunately, I've tried to do a analysis and find good studies where people have actually compared this towards, let's call it, bad practices. There's information around it, but very few people have done a project a bad way and then a good way and compared the two. So the data is not so much available, what I saw, but from my practices, I've been involved in ERP projects where it's been done twice, in one case three times, uh, because of the not having this type of stuff. So and it's pretty logical. I mean, if it was your company, let's say it is your company, and you are manufacturing, it's a hobby of mine, you're manufacturing some stuff, and you have to buy, in my case, I've got a hobby where I manufacture camping tents, which go on your roof. Now, to buy the aluminium and the canvas and all of that's a lot of money. And if you don't have standard processes in place, you're going to waste a lot of money and it's going to be your money. And this is unfortunately the reality. Companies, people are a bit divorced in terms of the actual cash flow and the expenses and low productivity. So, yeah, I
yeah,
think that's the point I try
and
to make over there. I think that drives to this slide. And unless you have another
yes, go
question.
ahead.
So, I then 2 years ago, a little bit less than 2 years ago, I really struggled with this whole concept of why the adoption of such good things is so low in companies. I mean, it still baffles me because it's so obvious, but why is it so low? And I had a few debates with a few people, and I then came to the conclusion that in most cases, the tooling that you use out there is too technical. And I was a culprit of that for many years myself, being a manager and senior manager in those areas. I was looking at these things from an academic point of view and how cool it was for architects, business analysts, and those sort of people. And not thinking about I've got a whole company behind me of 10,000 people, 5,000 people, or whatever, that needs to actually use this stuff. So, I was blind towards that. So then I set a few criteria for myself, and I said, what I want to find out there is a tool which can do these things on the top, understanding your work, executing your work, improving your work, and it must have a good set of non-functionals. So there are many, many tools out there. Some of them not even appearing on this list. I also played around with some of them, but you can see the names of pros of tools that I evaluated. And how did I do my evaluation? It was really simple, but a lot of work. I decided that I need to take two processes, and I did one process in the HR area, which is job requisition. So everybody would recognize that one. And I did a sales process of, how do you, let's say, order to cash type thing? How do you get, generate leads, get orders in a manufacturing type business? And I designed these processes in each of these tools. So I went to each one of these and I designed it in there. Then I was very happy and like a little child, had a small group of colleagues and friends. Then I ordered coffee and I for their time and cookies and things, and then I made them sit. And on a big screen, I presented my wonderful creation to them, and they weren't excited, not at all. They're friends. They tell me, it's rubbish or it's this or no, we won't be able to use this. So I then did all of this, and the one day I had done this whole thing in Glue. This is going to sound cheesy, but this is what happened. Then I presented the findings in Glue. And I know the one lady I actually saw yesterday in the shop, and I said to her, I'm going to talk about you today. She was a executive in HR capacity, and she actually stood up and she said, wow, this I can use in our company. And the rest of the people around the table also agreed. Then I realized I'm onto something. And yes, Glue is so different. It's a non-technical tool. It's geared towards, I think it's been designed from day one for end users, but it doesn't do away for the manager and the people in that area to actually do process management. It's very good for that as well. But the focus of the tool is towards your end users, and I would say to ensure that process adoption becomes easier for companies. It's just not technical. I've been in a discussion now with a company where I'm not trying to knock the tool at all. It's a very good tool, but it's not even on the list here. But it's a tool, a good tool for a different set of people, and it Sparks Enterprise Architect. They wanted to say, but yeah, we have Sparks Enterprise Architect. We can do process management in it. I said, yeah, you can, but not to the same standard. So after, I did the whole thing, they also came to the conclusion it's not the correct way of doing it. So I think at the end of the day, I don't think this is a silver bullet. I'm not trying to make it sound like Glue is now the be all and end all. It's still hard work. It's still a lot of effort, but it just simplifies such a lot of things to drive user adoption. And the one customer I'm working with now here in Cape Town, um, it's the first time in all these years where I have requests for access to the system from people. Previously, you had to push access down, say you will use this. Now I have people saying, can I please have access to this? This is going to help me in my area. And that was the test. So yeah, I think that's just what I wanted to say over there.
Yeah, can just before you continue, just one comment, because I also, of course, agree that when you look out in the market, there are literally hundreds of different business process management tools, or at least some of them may not really be business process management, but they have a flavor of business process management in it, because a lot of them are, as you said, you could find really great tools for architects, but they weren't that useful for maybe for the users. And the same, we also see there are tools that specialize on specific processes. It's maybe within HR or within some other type of process, or it may be very traditional document flows, or which used to be paper-based, but document approvals and so on. So very specific to individual tasks. So how did you really come up with you had, what was it, 9 different tools on the list there. How did you do the short list? Because it's I assume you didn't just take the top 10 from a Google search, but how did you get to that?
Yeah, it was a bit of a mix, I guess. I'm a funny person in that sense. I've been playing around with all the tools all the time. I'm still playing with tools, so I'm still constantly evaluating what's out there. So I've been looking at tools. I'm curious about this. This is my subject area, and it's like I need to know what the competition is doing from that perspective. So I've been curious all the time, and from that perspective, as I said, my criteria was this whole thing of ease of use and being really not totally. I don't want. I'm gonna maybe irritate a lot of people now, but I didn't want something that was a pure BPMN technical tool, because the reality is, I love BPMN, but the end users don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So I was looking for something that was a sweet spot between the two. So from that perspective, a lot of them fell away. And I was also not looking for something which was a combination of enterprise architecture, system design, process management, like Sparks, all bundled in one thing. I was looking for something that was a focus on business process management. That made the list smaller. And because I'm in the South African market, pricing was a big thing because of the exchange rates and whatever. Pricing is very prevalent for me. And yeah, so then I came to that list, and and the execution side of things. I wanted the execution capability. I'll just tell you this story quickly. Just look at the time here. It's fine. I did a big project a few years ago, yeah, whatever. It was with another company, another tool, also with one of the big 5 consulting partners on board. And we were doing compliance processes for a very large, really global financial services company. And it was all about processes, your legal compliance type processes and those sort of things. And the one day we did a process where there was a process, funny name, can't remember exactly, but it was about what do you do when you realize that it's a terrorist organization that wants to invest big money into this company? So what happens then? So you can think about this now. That process is fairly complicated because it depends if it's in America, whether it's in Sweden, or wherever. Different places got different laws and whatever. So we designed this process to the T. And one day on my bicycle, I was thinking, this is now fantastic. We've got this process. But who's going to look at this process when the event happens? How are you going to actually run this thing? And that's when I realized I needed a tool to run this thing, because, if you think about it, I'm not sure if everybody follows what I mean. I've got this very good process definition. Uh, but now when the event happens, how do you start the process and how do you take it through all the different steps and make sure everybody follows the process? And that's when I realized I needed something that can actually manage those complexities in companies. A ERP system is not going to cover that for you because it's outside of the box of a ERP. Yeah, and that's how I guess Glue featured very strong because it has that capability not only of designing the standard ways of working, but then the ability to track the task executions and allocating task and monitoring task completion, based on the processes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank
So I'm just looking at the clock here, and I want to go through this slightly quicker now. But what makes Glue different? I probably sound like a salesman now, but for me, as a real end user of these tools, the simplicity and accessibility was very, very good. It has a very nice SME focus because you can cater for large companies, but it's well geared towards the smaller businesses as well. It's a really cool unified platform, and as I said earlier, it focuses on managing the backbone. So it's not a technical EA or whatever tool. It's that sort of thing. Um, this whole thing of role-based execution, I said that right in the beginning. Go to somebody on the floor, tap on their shoulder, and say they must explain their job to you. So this thing has got that very nicely sorted, but not only on the definition side, also in the execution side. The person will be able to now, once they run a Glue, they will actually be able to tell you and show you which tasks are allocated to them and where they are in the duration of the process with these things. So, the things like no code customization, execution focus, integration friendly, all those sort of things. So, I'll go through a few of the topics here covering that. So, this whole topic of simplicity and accessibility is actually quite a few slides, but the one thing here is it's so easy to build or not build, to configure um, different entry points into the system depending on the different stakeholders. In this example here, I've got a whole company, the tops of the company associated to their core capabilities, and from there you can dive down into the relevant areas of their processes. But you can also search. You also have a dashboards which is allocated to yourself and so forth. But this is a very easy interface. So the next area that I wanted to cover, same thing under accessibility. You can now switch from that view to this showing the groups. And here you have a very nice breakdown in terms of the different categories, the groups, and the processes in those different groups. And those of you who are familiar with APQC, you will notice it follows the APQC structure, which makes perfect sense because it's being utilized by so many companies out there. And what's nice, Glue also has got the APQC framework in the tool, so you could actually leverage that if you don't have your own set of standards of defining your processes. Doesn't mean you have to go complete APQC. You can combine this with something like ITIL or whatever. So yeah, it's the same sort of look and feel, but you can combine things. But really cool interface, very easy to do. Then you can switch now to showing the lists, and yeah, what you don't see on the slide, but there on the top right hand corner, those filters, very powerful. You can now start narrowing down how you want to see content. As a specific end user, you can now save your filters. So if you're a finance guy or whatever, you can create ways of accessing your processes, save it, and it will show you the stuff that's associated to you as an individual. This thing I like quite a lot. It touches a bit on some of the, let's call it analysis or enterprise architecture analysis type capabilities, but at a much, um, yeah, it's a simple way of doing it. So you can generate how things are connected. Again, the same concept with your filters. You can now start looking into processes and the different activities, the different roles, the different systems, the different documents, regulations, and all of that you can filter very easily. I actually use this quite often on projects. So I like when I scope a project is to, as I said earlier, is to connect processes to the project. And what's nice about this, you can then also see, let's say you define 4 processes which are in scope. But if you click on the process, you will see, but this process has got a connected process to it. You didn't think about it previously, but now when you're going to change this process, it's going to impact either a predecessor or a successor process. So this feature is really cool, very easy. You don't have to go and do funny stuff. It just does it for you. It's really, really easy to do
Yeah.
analysis.
Uh,
This I talked about from a project perspective point of view, but also building end-to-end scenarios. This is a really simple one, order to cash, but for this gives you the ability to map and model and manage all your connected processes. And you can do many of them, order to cash, procure to pay, whatever it is. Very easy to do that. And from there, you can dive down to the various sub-processes and their details. Again, you can do the same analysis on top of these things. You can identify the systems, the people. I didn't even touch the skills of people, certifications that they have or not have, and things like that. So really, really powerful from that point of view. And I think this is where the next one is when you dive down now into one of those sub processes. Um, the pure BPMN nerds will now be leaving the session, and because this is not BPMN, so it's really, but you can use BPMN if you like. Glue supports that as well. I just found that end users relate to this much easier. And from this, you have now your end-to-end business process. And from your end-to-end business process perspective, you can now dive down into, and I don't have it here on the slide, but if I click on one of these boxes, you actually have access to the work instructions completely associated to the processes and to, well, sorry, to the activities connected to the processes. Another one that's very key at this level. Glue focuses on mapping and modeling activities. The detailed tasks which people tend to do is they put it all in one picture, is click here, navigate here, do this. It just clutters the whole process. Nobody can understand it. Screen flow, for instance. That sits below this as actual tasks. There you can connect it to the execution side where you can actually build things to track the execution of tasks, digital forms that people have to fill in, checklists and things like that. So yeah, I think that covers that sort of area. We can talk a lot around this, but we don't have the time now. The one I talked about earlier is this capability. I'm actually using Glue in both scenarios now as we speak. 100% the same tool. Both find it comprehensive enough for what they want to do. And so it's well priced for both of them. But in terms of features, it is not overwhelming for these people. And it's more than comprehensive enough for these guys on that side. Right. All right. So a unified platform. This is $1 million slide, and one should take, look at it carefully. This ability to execute processes connected to your definition is mega important. To drive maturity, you need to have data. So this gives you the data in terms of performance and durations and things like that, in terms of your designed process. Without this, it's very difficult to do improvements. Yes, you can have improvements based on people's input into driving improvements. So Glue has got a very, very nice capability to drive the whole idea from a comment to a suggestion to approved suggestions to actually realizing the end result. With other words, tracking the whole idea from begin to end. So a bit like requirements management built into the product. So which is fantastic, but it's connected to the processes. So again, I said earlier with Jira and all these other tools, now you can have your suggestions or requirements connected to activities, to processes with statuses. And what's nice about that, once you want to release the process, it asks you, have you actually implemented these requirements? So it checks for you automatically, it brings it up, and it says, you had these requirements. Have you actually tested them, and have they actually been done against the process? And then you can select the ones that you have done. The ones you haven't done will stay there until you actually have done all of them. So it's a nice way of tracking, let's call it requirements management. So from that perspective. Um, right, I wanted to go here quickly. This is something else. So from an execution point of view, you can see here now, for instance, this is what I talked about tasks. Here you can see tasks related to a particular process. On the right-hand side, you can see a digital form associated to that task. In this case, there's a form that needs to be completed. If the person forgot how to do this, they can click on the work instructions in the top right corner, and they will still have access to the complete standard operating procedure in a very well written format. Can have video in there, can have pictures in there, and so forth. So very easy. So, and what's nice about this, things don't stay static. We know it changes. So if things changes, these connected roles will be notified, and they know where to, what has changed, and you can drive your change management cycle more effectively that way. I talked about this earlier, and this is about the requirements management aspect of it. Um, Such a simple interface, but yet so powerful in terms of connecting your requirements. And this is a very key one for me, connecting your IT department to your business process management type roles, or even the business leaders, because now you're all seeing the same picture. They want to work on requirements and do their little thing over there in terms of coding and testing and doing screen designs and building, user experience stuff. But it's all connected to the process via the activities, and the business user can see clearly if his or her requirement has been implemented correctly, right? Uh, Yeah, so no code customization. It's a single slide here, not so much on it, but in Glue, the execution side of things is based on cases. So you build cases, you build case templates. You can have more than one case template per process. So with other words, let's say you have a recruitment, or let's say an onboarding process. You might have one which is different for a casual worker, for one that's an executive, but it's all based on the one process definition. So when you onboard an executive, you can click and select the executive case, and it'll take you through more comprehensive steps. And if you take the casual, it'll take you through less steps, and you're still managing everything, all the work instructions, everything associated to it. No coding, just configuring basically. I talked about this as well. So this is a view of actually looking at your progress in terms of where you are in the world of executing processes. You can also navigate from here by clicking on the process tab. You can actually see this on the processes as well. This is like a dashboard of all your cases and the status of your cases, where they are. So very nice interface, very easy, simple way to track progress. So from a manager point of view, you can have an elevated view, so you can see all the processes of your team and their work. And as a role, you only see the things associated to work that where you are involved in. Okay, nearly finished. All right, this whole topic of continuous improvement, I talked about that earlier. I'm not going to labor the point too much right now, but what's nice about here, the versioning in Glue, if you have improvement suggestions which have been approved and they in the process, they are together now, so they are connected. So when you release the process again, so once you've tested the process, it's going to ask you, prompt you, that's the right word in English. It's going to prompt you whether you've actually implemented all these requirements, and then it will tick them off if you say yes, and then it'll create the version for you. Last slide, long presentation, I know, but it's got very, very nice tools of integrating to a complete ecosystem. So you can see on the slide yourself, very easy to integrate to Power BI, Microsoft Teams, and so forth. So overall, a really nice packaged solution in a user-friendly format at a decent price. I think that was it.
Thank you for that. And you have already praised Gluu so much, so I feel that I shouldn't. But nonetheless, when I looked at your slides, I just saw that some of them were not the from the latest version or the latest releases. So just want to say that, of course, we are working on a lot of these features, gradually improving them as we go along, and specifically actually on your last slide, then the next release will be about a better API for a better integration with, especially on the Microsoft ecosystem. But I did just, if any of you out there have any questions, please write them. If not, I did take note a few times, but I thought it was too dangerous to interrupt Etienne in order to meet the or to stay within at least an hour here. Because one of the things that I thought about when you related to this, these different levels of maturity, and also the note that you made at the beginning about AI, because that also reflects to the overall automation kind of approach to processes, that you really need to have done all the work before. You can't just go from the ad hoc and then into start thinking that an AI or some smart automation tool can solve all the steps in between. So I think really thinking about this maturity model and the way that you need to progress from the current level, and then you need to go through different steps. And I think people, when they talk about AI, sometimes think that's some kind of magic fairy dust that you sprinkle upon a process or another business problem, and then it's solved. And that, of course, is not the case. And also, there were several times really where you talked about the tasks and activities and how different things should be structured to make this easy overview, and how you have this visual connection between the activities. That also means that if you update one process, one work description, then you can actually see also if there are anything that are disconnected. You can find those things as well. So I think one of the things I thought about really was how important it is to have the back to the business backbone management way of thinking in this, that you need to have that, even if it is a relatively easy tool to use, and I'm fairly new with Gluu, and I think it is easy to start using it. Then you need to have this, at least if as a process owner and a process manager, you need to have this thorough way of thinking about your business and your processes, and that you can't really just skip a lot of steps if you want to improve going forward.
Yeah, I would like to respond to that because you just triggered something in my mind now. If you think about the decomposition of your process, so you have your process which consists of activities, and activities consist of tasks. Automation usually happens for some of those tasks. It's not in all cases that's all the tasks and the whole activity is automated. So it's some of the tasks in that activity that needs to be automated or can be automated. But if you don't know what the tasks are, it's very difficult to figure out where to go to. And I think that's, yeah, I mean, it's obvious, but I mean, at the top level, you have a thing that says create order in activity. But to create that order, there are steps that you have to go through the tasks. And in some cases, it might, automate doing a lookup of an order number, comparing it to stock on hand or whatever. Those are things that can happen at that level. So it's not replacing the one or the other. Both of them are actually still relevant. I think it just gives you the ability to manage it better. That's really it.
Yeah.
I think we're saying the same thing. It's it's just a decomposition.
Yeah.
I think that's. And I see there Yuri has asked a question here about integration to Confluence. I guess I don't know the answer to this because you say there's a new API coming out, and I guess if the previous API was very good, then I would say yes. I guess the new one's going to be better, so I would say yes. I haven't done it on my own.
Yeah, and I can check with the tech guys whether specifically on
Yeah.
that, but I just know that it should be improved to make it easier, because a lot of integration possibilities today will require a little bit of tinkering. So it should be made easier, and especially for the Microsoft ecosystems, where it will eventually show up as a standard
Okay.
integration and app. So that should be.
Okay. Yeah, I hope it's covered sort of what I try to get across. I mean, it's a wide topic. Um,
Yeah,
so
definitely.
yeah,
And I think I actually have one additional
there's
question.
another question here.
Oh,
Is process maturity assessment possible with new tool? I would say yes, because in Glue you could build. Yeah, we actually have done quite a few things around some of these things. We actually use Glue in one of the companies, not for this, but to actually identify um, content to design a new process. So in Glue, because you've got the ability to configure a quiz, for instance, you could actually do a quiz across processes depending on your criteria you put up to get to the maturity levels. So, but it also can give you the information in the tool itself, so you can get some stats in terms of uh, which people are using the processes, um, the
yeah,
utilization of the tool. So that stats is available, and you can filter that, and that's in the tool. So you can get an idea of on the dashboard side of things, if processes, which processes have been designed, have they been, which of them have gone through release cycles, which of them have been optimized. So there's a lot of information in terms of process
yeah,
usage in the tool. So that can help
yeah.
you to drive maturity.
Yeah, I can just quickly add to that. I know we are closing in at the top of the hour, but that is also actually one of the things that is in the development pipeline right now, is more reports, automated reports, so that you can see more proactively which processes are actually being followed, which process managers are updating their processes. What are the number of steps in a process? Has it been, if you have an objective of simplifying a process, have the number of tasks in it, in each activity, have those been reduced? So those are some of the things that that we are planning to improve on in the next iterations. And of
Yeah,
course,
I'm looking.
we would,
I'm
yeah,
Yeah, I'm looking at the screen now, and the feature in terms of which it's now in the process of being refined. But I can look at my repository and I can see how many standard processes, how many shared processes, how many process views, optimized processes, how many tasks have been executed, due tasks, not completed tasks, things like that. So there's a lot of information from that perspective. Yes.
yeah, and then just
Good.
one final thing about the integrations. There will also be a better integration with things like Power BI, where you can do some more dashboards and visualizations of the process maturity, if you want to call it that, or the process characteristics, at least. We can call that.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
I think we need to stop here. I think we could talk for a long time if necessary. I want to thank you for joining. You will receive a link to a recording of this webinar and a evaluation form, as well as of course, contact details. If you want to see how Gluu works, we'll be happy to set up a session on that. And of course, we're always open for you. If you have any questions, comments, just please reach out. So I think
Thank
that
you.
was it. So thank you very much, and have a nice afternoon.
Bye.